When you hear the word barbarian, what comes to mind? Is it this? A savage warrior, clad in furs, screaming a battle cry under a stormy sky. The horned helmet, the giant axe, a brute from the edges of the known world. For many, this image is synonymous with one group in particular, the Vikings. Fearsome raiders from the north, sailing their long ships to plunder and destroy. But what if this powerful image, the one we see in movies and games, is mostly a myth? What if the reality was far more complex and far more interesting? Let's shatter the stereotype. The word barbarian itself comes from the ancient Greeks. To their ears, foreigners who didn't speak Greek just sounded like bar. It simply meant outsider, someone who didn't share their language or customs. It didn't always mean savage. Now, let's look again at our Viking. Beneath the warrior's shadow lies a different story. This is the world they truly navigated, a vast network, not just of raids, but of trade. Their ships carried more than just swords, and they brought back silver from the Arab world, silks from Byzantium, and glass beads from the Rhine. These weren't just destroyers, they were merchants, explorers, and master craftsmen. They were a vital link in a global economy. So join us as we sail past the myth and discover the real world of the so-called barbarians.
Before the dragon prow sliced through the morning mist, the world was a fractured mosaic. The year is 790 AD. The ghost of Rome still haunted the land, but its grand unifying roads and sea lanes were decaying memories. Across Europe, a new, uncertain order was taking shape. In the south, the vast Abbasid Caliphate dominated the Mediterranean. Their vibrant trade networks a world away from the isolated north. Their dhows, laden with silks and spices, sailed seas once ruled by Roman triremes. Further north, the ambitious Frankish king, the future Emperor Charlemagne, a long white beard wearing a simple crown holding an orb and scepter, was hammering together a new empire. His strength was on land, in his heavy cavalry and disciplined legions. But his gaze was fixed inward, his coasts and the North Sea largely ignored. These northern coastlines, from the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of Britain to the shores of Francia, were dotted with centers of immense wealth. Monasteries rich with gold relics and illuminated manuscripts, and unprotected trading towns known as wicks were islands of prosperity in a sea of subsistence. Their trade was local, their connections fragile, and their defenses almost non-existent. A dangerous power vacuum had formed on the water. The old maritime order was gone, but a new one had not yet risen to take its place. This was a world of opportunity for those with the courage, the skill, and the right kind of ship to seize it. A world completely unaware of the storm gathering just over the horizon.
Before the longships, before the legends, there was a quiet metallic pulse. A river of wealth flowing not from the west, but from the heart of the Islamic Golden Age. In the 9th century, a strange and powerful catalyst reached the cold shores of Scandinavia. It wasn't forged in their lands, it was the Abbasid silver Dirham. Thousands upon thousands of these coins, intricately inscribed, began a monumental journey. They traveled from the bustling markets of Baghdad and Samarra, carried along the vast Volga trade route. Up winding rivers, through dense, dark forests, these small silver discs were a current of change. Poured into the hands of Norse traders, they represented unimaginable purchasing power. This wasn't just treasure to be buried, it was capital, it was the spark. With this sudden influx, local economies exploded. Simple chieftains could now fund the construction of bigger, better ships. They could pay warriors, forge superior weapons, and plan raids and trade missions on a scale never before seen. The silver dirham didn't just buy goods, it bought ambition. It financed the very ships that would soon terrorize the coastlines of Europe. The Viking Age, in many ways, was ignited not by a battle cry, but by the quiet clinking of distant silver, an unlikely fuel for a fire that would reshape the world.
While the image of the fearsome raider dominates our minds, the true engine of the Viking Age wasn't just the sword, but the scale. These Norse seafarers were master merchants, their dragon-headed longships not just vessels of war, but of commerce, connecting worlds once thought impossibly distant. From their Scandinavian homelands, two great arteries of trade pulsed outwards. To the east, they navigated the treacherous rivers of the Rus, a highway of water leading to the riches of the Byzantine Empire and the Abbasid Caliphate. Animated lines will trace this path, down the Volga and the Dnieper. Here, Scandinavian furs, amber, and, tragically, slaves were exchanged for shimmering silks, intricate jewelry, and vast hoards of silver dirham coins from Baghdad. To the west, their ambition knew no bounds. They pushed across the storm-tossed North Atlantic, establishing trade posts in Iceland, Greenland, and even reaching the shores of North America. On this route, exotic goods like walrus ivory, prized for its beauty, and thick polar bear pelts flowed back to the markets of Europe. This was no simple barter system. It was a sophisticated, globe-spanning network that funneled immense wealth back to the north, funding their raids, their kingdoms, and forever changing the economic map of the medieval world.
The Vikings didn't just take, they traded. Their longships, once feared for raids, now carried valuable goods. From the cold north, they brought luxurious furs, sable, marten, and fox, prized by Europe's elite. On the Baltic shores, they gathered amber, the gold of the north, a fossilized resin used for beautiful jewelry and art. From the Arctic waters came walrus ivory, a substitute for elephant tusks, carved into exquisite art and game pieces. But their most tragic cargo was human, slaves, captured in raids or bought in eastern markets, their lives traded for silver dirhams from the Abbasid Caliphate. These goods flowed down the great rivers of the Rus, connecting Scandinavia to the rich markets of Byzantium and the Islamic world. In return, a river of silver flowed back north, funding more ships, more voyages, and cementing the Norse legacy not just as warriors, but as master merchants of their age.
While sagas sing of fire and steel, another Viking story was written in silver and silk. This was the age of the Emporia, the great trading hubs that became the engines of the Viking world. Far from chaotic raiding camps, these were organized, thriving towns. From the cold Baltic shores, two names rise above the rest: Birka in modern Sweden and Hedeby at the foot of Denmark. These weren't just markets, they were magnets, pulling in goods and people from across the known world. Imagine the docks of Hedeby, a bustling port where long ships moored beside merchant cogs. Frankish swords, Rhineland glass, and fine pottery were offloaded. In return, the Norse offered precious amber, fine furs from the deep north, and, tragically, slaves captured in their eastern raids. Coins from the Abbasid Caliphate, stamped with Arabic script, jingled in purses alongside Anglo-Saxon silver. In these melting pots, a Norseman could bargain with a Slav, a Frank, or even an Arab merchant. These hubs were the first true cities of the north, laying the foundations for the kingdoms that would one day dominate Scandinavia.
To grasp the Viking Age, you must understand a central paradox. It wasn't simply a choice between the sword and the coin. They were two sides of the same strategic game. Picture a long ship slicing through the cold sea. On deck, warriors, axes gleaming, their goals set on plunder. They storm a coastal village, a soft, unsuspecting target. The raid is swift, brutal, and profitable. This is the classic image. But now, picture the same ship, weeks later, sailing to a bustling market. The men who wielded axes now display fine furs and shimmering amber. This is the raider-trader paradox. Why raid one town and trade with the next? The answer is cold pragmatism. A fierce raid sent a powerful message. We are strong. Do not defy us. This reputation, built on fear, often opened doors to better trade. Merchants might offer better terms just to avoid becoming the next victim. The threat of the sword made the coin flow faster. Conversely, a trade mission was a perfect disguise. Vikings could assess a town's wealth, its walls, its defenses. If a settlement looked weak, a peaceful merchant could become a raider in a flash. Opportunity was their only king. This duality was their genius, a brutal but effective formula for building an empire of wealth and influence.
For centuries, a river of silver flowed. From the rich mines in the heart of Central Asia, this wealth traveled up the great rivers of the Rus and into the eager hands of Norse traders. It was the lifeblood of their economy, funding ships, settlements, and ambitions. But by the late 10th century, this river began to run dry. The Samanid mines, once gushing with wealth, were sputtering out. Political turmoil and simple exhaustion of the veins turned the flow to a trickle and then to dust. For the Norse, this wasn't just a disruption, it was a catastrophe. Their entire economic system, built on this steady supply of Arab dirhams, began to fracture. Hordes from this era tell the story. Fewer coins, older dates, and clipped edges show desperate attempts to stretch a dwindling resource. The age of silver-fueled expansion was over. A new, harsher economic reality had dawned, forcing the Norse to adapt or fade.
The age of the Viking raider eventually faded. It did not end with a final cataclysmic crash, but with a gradual merging into the very kingdoms they once terrorized. Their iconic longships, once feared as symbols of plunder and destruction, gracefully found a new purpose. But their most enduring, world-shaping legacy wasn't forged in the heat of battle, but rather in the bustling markets and the vast, far-flung trade routes they so expertly pioneered. These were never just simple lines on a map. They were the vital arteries of a new economic lifeblood, tirelessly pumping goods, shimmering silver, and radical new ideas from the Caspian Sea all the way to the distant coast of Newfoundland. Look closely at the economic geography of Northern Europe today. See the great thriving port cities, Dublin, York, Kiev, and Novgorod. So many of these urban centers either began as or were vastly expanded and enriched by these ambitious Norse settlements. The paths they carved through treacherous seas and along winding ancient rivers didn't vanish when their era closed. Instead, they evolved, becoming the superhighways of the medieval world. They laid the very foundation for powerful trading blocs like the Hanseatic League and the complex commercial networks that would define Europe for centuries to come. The echo of the Longship's oar can still be heard in the hum of modern global trade, a lasting testament to a people who were not just warriors, but master merchants who truly reshaped the world, one silver dirham at a time.